Well, today in the shop, our labor of love finally came to fruition. It took 8 videos, countless hours, a little bit of frustration making a second part, but we finally have the companion seat cowl that we made as a prototype for the 650. Now we have one for the MT-09. I already had made one years and years ago for the R1, so I have 3 of them in my collection of bikes. I like this one the best. I think each one just gets a little bit better, a little bit nicer. And I'm glad I took the time, even though the 8 videos go on and on. It seems like it goes on forever. But for somebody that really wants to make a part like this, and it could be a similar part for any bike, it doesn't really matter. And you can watch every one of them in full 4K on a big screen. Adjust your device. Now, it's been a long time coming. Believe me, long for me too. And we finally are at the point where I'm going to get a day to buff this out, wet sand it, 2000 grit, buff it out, and install it on the bike and take some pictures. I really am excited about this. The finish on this is going to be perfect when we're done, and it has been a true labor of love. There's no other way you can describe doing this kind of a custom project. So the first thing I wanted to see is, and it was not real sunny out there, but I wanted to see how this was going to look out in the sunlight. And usually a sunlight obscures any flaws you have in it. Once you get it under fluorescent light, you see the flaws a lot easier. So that back down to the shop, get some 2000 grit sandpaper, and this is the Red Line 2000 grit, a little bit of soapy water, some warm water with some dish detergent in it, and my trusty block I've had over 30 years now, $10 tool. It's going to outlive me, and it's super handy. Now, I just wanted to show, and I always do this on tutorial videos, the idea is to impart the knowledge that I've gained over a lifetime of doing this, in both in modeling and in other things, and of course in motorcycle restoration. So this clear now, a couple of the tricks I used. I let this sit up by the heating vent because it was cold in the, well, just up to today. Today it warmed up, but the heat was on, so this was sitting up by a heating vent and literally getting harder and harder by the day, and it sanded out like butter. Anytime you go to do this the next day, and I know there's all kind of counterpoints to this, wait a day, wait 2 hours, wait 2 weeks, but I know butyrate dope, you wait as long as possible, a year. And on this material, I found if you wait even 2 or 3 days, you save so much time. The paint just seems to sand out that much better. Now, I don't know if it's my shop conditions or my technique for painting, but that is what works for me. Now, of course, if you're in a body shop or a high-tech place with heat lamps and everything, all the rules change. Now, just wanted to show one in real time. I always like to show how long it should take to get that part flat with a block. And because this is something that I really am going to be looking at for the rest of my life, I picked away at every little piece of dust and flaw in the paint. Remember, I paint outside. I don't have a spray booth. I don't have controlled conditions. But in the end, and all that really matters is at the end, we win. The part is beautiful. So if you don't have really expensive equipment and you don't have controlled conditions, doesn't mean you can't get a really nice result. And I think the stuff that I've done on the really, without spending a whole lot of money on equipment or without renting equipment, to me, it just makes sense to explain to people, and I try to explain as honestly as I can. It is not the cost of the equipment. It's not the cost of the shop conditions. Even if you paint outside in the winter under uncontrolled conditions, as long as you do this step, the final clear has to be perfect, sanded and buffed. If you're willing to sand and buff, the rest of it, you can get away with a lot of stuff that you can't if you don't buff parts out. So after a given amount of time, we've got it as good as we can in terms of getting rid of every little flaw in it. It's time to get out the 8065. Now, there's a lot of good products. I got some from Dale that worked out real well. I've got the Meguiar's but this is the one that I like. Now, it's a personal thing. Everybody has something different that they like, and they're probably all good. But one good tip, put a new pad on every time you buff soft paint. If you're buffing hard paint that's 100 years old, like when I buff out my car, yeah, you can get away with an old pad. But when you're doing something like this, that paint is soft and delicate still until it ages and cures. And I'm not sure what the difference is when you're doing paint, what the hardness is, or whether it's just my imagination. But I know a new pad, a brand new pad, it's going to cut mostly on the edge. The edge of the pad is where it's going to do a lot of work. And I like to flood the part with 8065. I try not to fool around with this. I get the stuff on there, and it's just my way of doing things. And this can get a little time consuming because I want to be real careful. I don't want the buffer anywhere near that rib. And as I've done it 3 or 4 times already, I put plenty of compound on there, and I don't want to get the edge of that buffer anywhere near the rib. I'll do that center rib by hand, because the edge of that buffer can take and put a gouge in it or a defect. And I'm trying so hard to make this part absolutely perfect. This part sits on top of the motorcycle. It's one of the first things you see when your gas tank in the top of the seat. If there's a flaw in it, I know I'll see it anyway. So I'm really spending the time here, and this is the part of the job that, well, it takes longer than if you just give it a lick and a promise. But basically, I want to see what I want to see is if that shine is going to come up to where I'm going to be happy with it. Then I know I'm going down. I've let it cure long enough, and it's fine. And I can just, from this point on, use the buffer. It's probably about an hour to do that part. And this is the part that really consumes a lot of time. I'm doing that rib, all of the edges, all of the corners, all of the things you can't, right up in the front there, that edge that goes back, that touches the back of the seat. So all of this little handiwork, again, this is why I say it's a labor of love. It's just takes time. You have to be patient. You have to be willing to spend the amount of time it's going to take to do it right. And if you do that, what happens is the part, when you're done with it, the day you put it on the motorcycle and put it out in the sun, or go to a meetup, or take your first ride with that custom part. Now, I'm very proud of the way this part came out. I am really happy. I was happy with the one for the 650, but this one I just think goes to the next level. With that little rib in the middle and with the trim that matches the bike, it's very cool to me. So one of the final steps before I go and install it, well, there's actually 2 steps left, but getting a coat of Colonite. And thank you, Joe Padula, for introducing me to this. You can get it from Amazon. They have it at Amazon, and it is super good quality. Everybody I know that I've demonstrated this, I've done little demos on the hood of their car or on their motorcycle gas tank, they run out and buy some. This is really, really good quality stuff. And for me, because I ride it, there's dust and salt, and every once in a while you get rained on, this is a cheap protection, cheap insurance that after all this work, it's not going to be gone to hell in a handbasket. Now, this is the final thing. I'm looking under my fluorescent lights. Need a fluorescent light reflecting in there. Fluorescent lights show errors in paint. I took a razor, cut that little balsa wood piece of wood I had off, and I want to get that perfectly smooth. Now, this is a step I didn't want to leave off the video. You've got to get that smooth because that seat cowl is pressing right on the seat. And if there's a little sharp edge, I'm afraid that what'll happen is I'm going to take it off someday and I want to play Evil Twins or something, and there'll be a gouge or a wrinkle in the seat or something that I really don't like. So getting rid of that and making sure that's nice and smooth, that's one of the critical steps. I even went so far as to hit the little power sander on it. And I just got some little sharp edges, and then I take, and this is another really good tip if you're making a cowl like this, and especially I know Scott is making one, is where it's pressing on the seat and you don't see it, put Gorilla Tape. Gorilla Tape is thick enough. It'll act like a little cushion. It won't imprint into the seat. You'll save the seat cover, and of course we could always recover it, but it's always nicer. And maybe this will stay on for the life of the bike. But knowing me, how I always like to change things around, I'd like to always, one of my goals is always to be able to take it on, take it off, go right back where I was anytime I want, whether it's because I don't like it or because I want to change it, or maybe I want to make another one a different shape or something. I always want to have such a critical thing, always be able to put the part back. So of course, putting it back on the bike, piece of cake, and those little tabs worked perfectly, the little finger splint tabs. I think that captures the look of the MT-09, the trim that's on the gas tank. The color match, of course, is perfect. It came from the same thing of paint. It goes well with that little screen scoop that's in the back. Seems to coordinate well with the look of the taillight, the MT-09 taillight. In the final part, I was afraid maybe I'd miss that. And this one was the prototype. This one was just better than I ever could have expected. And I really like the way it changes the look of the bike. And I had the one on the R1. I made several of them. I made 2 before I got one that I kept. And this one is made out of wood, for anybody that wants to know. That is a piece of composite wood. And so I've made 3 of them, and I think the MT-09 one takes his place in the list. So now that the part is on the bike and we're ready to go take a ride, in fact, the time that I spent envisioning this part, trying to style it so it matched each one of the bikes, the styling, the paint work, making the patterns for the paint work, making sure in the case of the blue that we got an accurate match to the paint, and making a prototype. This was so important. I made this part when I was sick with COVID and I really didn't want to shoot video. I hardly could talk, and I'm so glad I made that, because that led me to believe I could really come up with this one that has the matching nose piece. That little rib matches the windshield. And from a styling point of view, now I've styled a lot of model airplanes and a lot of paint jobs, a lot of paint work that I was really proud of, and that some of my fellow modelers thought was pretty good too. But this one, and when I ran it by Karen and I showed her the bike all in one piece, and I said, does it hit the target here? And she looked at it and looked at the windshield and looked how it picks up that rib on the tail section, and how it really makes the tail section of the bike look very unique. The little scoop with the screening, and that the trim, I spent the whole day doing that trim, making a pattern. Well worth it at this point, well worth it. So if you are new to our channel and you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. We also cover riding in all different seasons that are as appropriate as we can. We like to do graphic and paint work from time to time. Usually it's in the winter. We hang out with our friends, try to get their bikes on the videos too. We love to do evil twins. Anybody that knows what an evil twin is will enjoy the channel. We do carbon fiber repairs, some of the things that you will not find anywhere else on the internet. General maintenance on motorcycles. And we try to get a video out almost every day. Sometimes they're about our model railroad, or our experience with model airplanes, or with antique bikes, or with the first superbike, the GS 1100E. But in the end, of course, it's about having fun with whatever motorcycle you ride. And we do enjoy every type of bike. That's the problem. Life is too short. And I love every one of the bikes in my humble collection. And probably some of the bikes in your collection I'm jealous of. And of course, the one Karen got me for my birthday, my beloved MT-09. And
Thanks for supporting the channel, and thanks so much for watching.